Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Optimizing Your Success. Guys, my name is Dr. Ruth Gotian. I study extreme high achievers. Those who have been watching week in and week out throughout the pandemic know that my book, The Success Factor, is coming out next week. And over the next few weeks, we are going to be meeting some of the people who are in the book. And one of the extreme high achievers who's in the book is actually our guest today, Dr. Scott Parazynski, who is joining us from Earth, from Arizona. But we're going to talk to him about in just 1 minute. I want to reintroduce you to our panel of high achievers again, because we're going to pepper Scott with questions, because he is about as high achiever as they come. So we have right below me, Dr. Bruce Wiley, the writer, journalist, professor, systems modeler, computational and digital health expert, has a great column in Forbes. Dr. Susan Byrne-Stone, to Bruce's right, is a clinical social worker, a systems therapist, international coach, professor, TV talk show producer and host, and a mental health consultant for the media, and a super connector. Janice Lintz is the #1 change maker with a special passion to help the millions of people worldwide with hearing loss. If you haven't yet checked out last week's Forbes article about her, Janice will put that, maybe you could put that in the chat. And Dr. Debbie Heiser, who's the co-founder and CEO of the Mentor Project, makes us all look good. I'm sure she'll put in the chat for everyone to read. And Susie Katz, an award-winning photographer and founder of Photo Wings, which helps people think creatively through photography. And then, of course, we have the great Scott Parazynski, Dr. Scott Parazynski, a physician, an astronaut, an inventor, an entrepreneur, climbed Mount Everest, and an Olympic luge coach. He makes the rest of us look really, really lazy, because any one of those things would have been sufficient. Now, here's the interesting part about Scott. We spoke quite a bit as we did the interview for my book, for The Success Factor. And never once did he mention that he had a very, very, very special recognition from NASA. In fact, I didn't even know it until I took a walk through the Kennedy Space Center last summer. And I was going through the, what's that called? The first building on the left where the Hall of Fame is. What's that building called? Scott, do you remember?
Bussey Center, I believe. They may have renamed it, but yeah.
Yeah. And all of a sudden I'm going around and I'm getting my tour. And then I see a photo of somebody I know. And there he is. There is Dr. Scott Parazynski, who is in the NASA Hall of Fame, the Astronauts Hall of Fame. Didn't even mention it once. That kind of a humble guy. Scott, welcome to Optimizing Your Success show. We are so thrilled to have you here. This is a true honor. Thanks for spending a little time with us on a Monday night.
Oh, I'm honored to be with all of you high achievers. Hopefully I can keep up here, but I've really enjoyed getting to know you, Ruth, and I think what you're trying to do with your book is really exciting. I'm thrilled to support your launch, and I want my autographed copy as well.
It's coming. Actually, tomorrow I'm going to sign all the books, so you will definitely be getting yours. Right. Now, Scott, take us to your story, because your story is really fascinating, because you could be a physician and we'd be in awe. You could be an astronaut, we'd be in awe. You could be in the Olympics, we'd be in awe. You could climb Mount Everest, we'd be in awe. All of these things, but you did all of them. Do you just not like to sit still?
Well, thank you for the flattering question, but I think I am a bit of a restless soul, I suppose, but I do love challenge. That's kind of in my DNA, and I hearken back to my very adventurous parents as well. I'm an only child, so it was a little bit easier for my parents when I was younger to pick up and move to some exciting places. first off, my father worked on the Apollo program when I was very young, so that sort of set the seed for my future trajectory. But also then traveling and living overseas, first in Dakar, Senegal, in West Africa, then in Beirut, Lebanon, Athens, Greece, and Tehran, Iran, back when Americans could actually travel to Iran. I had these incredible life experiences, meeting new people, having the ability to travel to places that most kids can only read about, and I recognized early on that life's greatest lessons actually come outside of the classroom. It's the people that you meet, the opportunities that you take, the chances that you take, with the willingness to periodically fail. And so that in a nutshell sort of, I believe, set me up for some great opportunities and some successes along the way as well.
I love that you brought that up, because one of the common themes that I saw with all of the high achievers is that they fear not trying more than they fear failing. And most people are actually afraid to fail, or they're afraid to succeed. But you and all the other high achievers who I interviewed feared not trying so much more than they ever feared failing. Where do you think that comes from? And was that true for you as well?
Absolutely. I think a great deal of credit goes to my mom and dad, who never dissuaded me from trying something new. They might have wished that I'd spent more time with the chess club than with the rock climbing club. Although I did both. I was a member.
Of course you were.
But so I did that as well. But they probably would have preferred me to pursue shuffleboard than high altitude mountaineering. But they never told me I couldn't do anything, and they allowed me to try and periodically fail. And I think that's such a great lesson for young people. It's a world full of opportunity, but it's the old adage, no discoveries are made if the ships stay in the port. You've got to get out there and explore and take on.
That's so true. And I don't know if you know this, but Janice is actually on a mission to travel to every country in the world. So I bet that the two of you can compare notes, because I know she's been to some of those places that you just rattled off there.
That would be a dream. I would love to do that someday with all my free time. But gosh, that would be amazing. There can't be many people in the world who have ever done that.
Less people have traveled to every country than have gone to the moon.
I believe it.
And I was exhausted trekking to Tingbo Che in Nepal, let alone climbing to the top of Mount Tundra. So I will stand back on this.
Wow.
Now, Scott, take us through, you traveled all over the world. And then one day you said, I'm going to be pre-med and I'm going to be a physician. So take us through that journey there.
Well, my grandfather, who I never met, sadly, he died of an aneurysm before I was born, was always a topic of conversation. What a wonderful man he was, a big heart. He was an eye surgeon. And then also my grandmother, his wife, was a nurse and she worked in his clinic. And so healthcare was always a fascination for me. I wanted to be able to help people. I had lived in some developing nations, and I had seen abject poverty and the need for improved healthcare in remote parts of the world. So that was really very attractive to me. And also having had that opportunity to see the Apollo program when I was very young. My father was an engineer helping design some of the systems to support the Saturn V boosters that took astronauts to the moon in the late 60s, early 70s. So with all this, kind of percolating in the back story for me, I went to college with the notion that, hey, if I want to have a life of adventure and challenge, I better get really good grades. I should try and get into a really good college, and become a healer. Maybe even, if I got really lucky, become a physician astronaut. And so I kind of always harbored these lofty goals. Didn't talk about them very much, even to my parents, but it was something that I really aspired to do. And if you kind of chip away at things, lo and behold, you can make progress towards those lofty goals. Not to get too bogged down into this particular theme, but I think one of the best lessons I learned as a kid was actually through the Boy Scouts. There's an Eagle Scout rank, which is the highest rank that you can attain.
Sure.
And a lot of my buddies, they started out with me, but they got discouraged. It's going to take 2 or 3 or 4 years to get there, and I've got other things to do, and they quit. But for me, what I was able to do is deconstruct the pathway to getting to where I wanted to be. I wanted to become an Eagle Scout, so it's one merit badge at a time, one service project at a time, one rank at a time. And if you can measure yourself not by that lofty, distant goal, but by intervening, achievable milestones along the way, it's reinforcing. It opens up other opportunities along the way, and that's sort of the pathway that I've followed my entire life.
You and every other high achiever who I've spoken to, they didn't look at the end goal. They looked at the end goal, and then they often reverse engineered it and then tackled it one project at a time. So it was not this challenge that seemed so overwhelming. It's, what do I need to do next? And what do I need to do next? And what do I need to do next? So it was never a question of if they can overcome the challenge. They always knew that they could. Instead, they focused on how to overcome the challenge. And that mindset is completely different than those who are quote unquote average. That's what makes you a high achiever.
Interesting. Yeah, that certainly resonates with me. That's my view on. So
you went to college. Where'd you go?
It was interesting. I was applying from overseas, from the Tehran American School, and I had no idea if any college would take me seriously. So I applied to 20 different universities and colleges. Cost a fortune, and I had to type it back in the day when you actually had to get a typewriter and physically type these applications together. So in any event, I got into one of my dream schools, which was Stanford, and
cool.
Went had a wonderful time at Stanford, and then stayed for medical school there. And
now hold on. So when I did my research before our interview, I found out you didn't just get into the MD program. You actually got into the super prestigious MD PhD program, and then decided to take a different route.
Yeah, my parents were disappointed by that. So, an MBA PhD program, if you're not aware, is typically, all expenses paid. And so it was really a hard moment for them to swallow the fact that I really didn't resonate with being a test tube researcher. Obviously, we need cancer biologists. We need people who are really adept at diving deep into the details. But I'm much happier at the macro level, and being a generalist in particular. So after about 1.5 years in the MD PhD program, I just converted into the regular MD program. Yeah.
Wow. So from there, you also had another little side project that you were working on in medical school, which usually medical school, and Bruce knows this because he's been through this, it's a full-time job. It's more than a full-time job. It's double what most people do. You can't usually take on this side project, and you took on a pretty major side project while you were in medical school. Take us through that part, because this is where the fun begins.
well, it's all been fun. But are you talking about pursuing luge?
Yeah.
Yeah. So medical school at Stanford is just wonderful. It's such a supportive place. They encourage academics, and so I was able to do some research at NASA Ames Research Center down the street at Moffett Field there in the Bay Area. But I was also able to pursue athletics during my tenure there as well. It was sort of a fluke. It was my 24th birthday, believe it or not. And a woman by the name of Bonnie Warner, who was the top American finisher in the Sarajevo Olympics, was going around the country recruiting athletes from other sports to try the sport of luge. And if you had some aptitude, both in reaction time and the ability to steer a sled down a steep hill, but also the physical fitness and so on to pursue it, you could win a berth to go spend 10 days in Lake Placid, New York, to try the sport for real on ice. And so I was one of the folks that was tapped to go do this. And I wasn't sure if Stanford Medical School would let me go, but lo and behold, it was during the time frame when I was doing clerkships. And clerkships are fairly modular, 4 to 6 weeks typically. And so they said, sure, you can go spend 4 months this first year. We'll obviously you have to still complete all of your clerkships before you graduate from medical school. But by the way, Bruce, I love your backdrops. You've got the coolest backdrops I've ever seen.
There's always a theme. I'm sure he'll let us know what it is.
I love the French fries.
Was that a question?
Yeah, there you go.
Bruce is trying to figure out why, how did you do all this?
But in any event, I was able to spend the next 3 years jumping back and forth between my medical training and pursuing hopefully a berth at the 1988 Calgary Games. I didn't quite ultimately make the U.S. team. I did my personal best in the Olympic trials leading up to the games. But
so let's talk about that. You made it to the Olympic trials while a medical student at Stanford. Just let that sink in for a moment. You do realize that's not the usual path.
Well, the path that we take through life is the one that we choose for ourselves. And the thing that I always tell people is, avoid like the plague people who tell you can't do things. You don't want yes people around you just to sing your praises or to tell you that you're all that. But you shouldn't have people around you that are going to discourage you. And so I have wonderful family, friends, colleagues at Stanford Medical School. I had a great supportive environment, and that was all I needed to. And it was tough. I recall my neurosurgery residency. I was not residency, my clerkship, which I really loved. In fact, I was really tempted to pursue neurosurgery, although I realized that if they needed a brain surgeon in space, it was a really, really bad day.
Yeah.
But there are times when I was on every third night call and maybe getting 6 hours of sleep every other night, and it was really tough to stay in shape to pursue the luge. But it all worked out, and I was able to.
But you made it to the Olympics in a different way.
Yes. So a very good friend of mine, Ray Ocampo, born in the Philippines, U.S. naturalized citizen, was able to represent his country of birth. And he's a very close friend of mine. He needed a coach and someone to help him, get ready for the Olympics. So I ended up being not only Ray's coach for the Philippine Winter Olympic team. Obviously the Philippines is a Winter Olympic powerhouse, but I was also by default the chef de mission, which is kind of the head of the delegation for the Philippines. And obviously I don't look very Filipino, but it was really an amazing experience to walk into opening ceremonies with my good friend Ray. And we were I think the smallest delegation in the entire Olympics. It was just the two of us walking behind the Filipino flag. and the entire section would stand up and do the wave as we
Wow.
walked around the stadium before the opening ceremony. So it's really a memorable life experience.
How great that you were able to do that. And I wish Devon was here. The two of you can compare notes about that opening ceremony.
I remember meeting Devon in my training at various Winter Olympic sites. So right before the Olympics, there's a World Cup series, and it's sort of a build up before the Olympic Games. So I think we ran into each other. We didn't really know each other back in those days, but in Innsbruck and Winterberg, Germany, and obviously their training in Calgary.
Wow. So Bruce, I have to ask, did you do anything like this when you were in medical school?
Actually, I think the Stanford program is very innovative, I think, and they understand. So it's one of the few programs. I was also in a flexible program, which I think recognized that you don't really grow from just like sitting in the classroom 8 hours a day, and instead, like I think they understand that you grow from interacting with your classmates, you grow from doing other things. And that if you are motivated yourself, like if you're motivated enough to get into Stanford Medical School, which is a fantastic med school, you're probably motivated enough to like teach yourself and move along. So I think the program was great. We had a program where we only had like an hour of lecture a day, and
Wow.
And we had like these tutorial things. So we actually had a fair amount of free time. Now, while Scott was trying out for the Olympics, that meant that I was able to watch a lot more movies and improve my basketball game, which was pickup basketball game. So maybe not the same level, but I think it was great to get a lot more free time.
Yeah. That's about when it started.
And
so
one thing, I guess, this. I mean, it seems like you also had a chance, Scott, to like do, I guess, what we call free play, meaning that you could just try different things, and then see, like, rather than have something like I've seen people where they say, okay, here's my life, and it's like 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, everything's scheduled out. I remember one of my classmates had basically every year of his life scheduled out for the next 45 years.
Ouch. Wow.
Whereas, I mean, it sounds like you were trying different things. Like, even though you had things that you were interested in, you were willing to try different things and then see where it took you. Is that correct? Or?
That's exactly right, Bruce. And I, as a parent, that's what I've tried to do with my kids as well, is just expose them to as many different things as possible and see what sticks, and see where the passions take them. But yeah, you're right. I never imagined myself doing the sport of luge, for example. That I thought that's just insane. I'd seen it on the prior Olympics, and I thought, wow, that would be really fun to try one day. But I probably will never have that opportunity. It presented itself, and so I had to jump.
You mean you weren't pre-luge in college?
No, I was not.
Okay.
Not a major.
No.
We just got a shout out from our mutual friend, everyone, Liana Shauli. So, hey, Liana, we see you too. Thanks for watching. And definitely let us know if you have questions, anybody who's watching out there. All right, Scott, you came back from the Olympics. How do we get from Olympics to becoming an astronaut?
Well, finishing medical school and then pursuing postgraduate training. So I did an internship in Boston at the Brigham and Women's Hospital, and then was in a residency training for emergency medicine in Denver, Colorado, and doing some high altitude physiology research at the time, and trying to figure out, when's the right time to apply to become an astronaut. And so I had a friend who was going to Baylor Medical School. I came down for a visit, had some introductions to a couple of astronauts and flight surgeons. And the advice that I got was, well, it can take 10 or more years before you finally get in. So apply early, The worst thing that can happen is you get rejected. But
Early and often, right?
early and often, yeah, maybe you learn something. Maybe it gives you an edge up. 10 years down the road when you finally really have a shot at it. So I was just minding my own business, thinking that I wouldn't get very far since I was still in my training. I had another year of training to go in my residency. But it turned out it was a year that they were really looking to hire physician scientists to help prepare for the International Space Station era, and also to conduct science aboard the Space Shuttle program. So I ended up getting an interview, and it was interesting because I really took it kind of lightly. I think if I had really focused on, oh my gosh, this is my one and only chance to interview for this job, I would have tensed up, and I wouldn't have been myself. I wouldn't have been that compelling a candidate. But I was just completely relaxed. I was having a great time. Several of my heroes were at the table. John Young, who had flown twice aboard Gemini, had flown twice in Apollo, including walking on the moon, had flown the very first space shuttle flight, and then these other really well-known astronauts that I had looked up to for many, many years. So they were sitting around the table, and we were just having this great conversation. And so I went home and thought, well, that was neat, and maybe in a few years I'll get a chance to become one of them. And lo and behold, they did select me that first go round. And
Scott, of all of the astronauts I've interviewed, you're the only one who got in on his first try.
Really? It's being in the right place at the right time. I think it was a time when we needed physicians and even other life scientists. My friend Rick Linehan, a veterinarian, was selected. So we had 4 docs and 1 vet in our class of 24. So it was pretty good odds for a doc that particular year. But better lucky than good, I always say.
Now, how long were you in NASA, and how many shuttle launches did you experience?
Well, so I spent 17 years at the agency, saw lots and lots of launches, but up close and personal with the rocket engines behind me 5 times. And it's just a life-changing experience, to leave the surly bonds of Earth. If you know the poem, there's nothing that can truly prepare you for the visceral, emotional experience of seeing your home planet from space, and it's also just to harness that kind of power to break free of gravity is outrageous. I'm so excited to be alive today, when there are now opportunities for many more people very soon to get a chance to do the same thing, whether it's a suborbital flight on Blue Origin or Virgin Galactic, or orbital flight with SpaceX. I think
Janice has signed up.
That really?
I'm signed up for Space Perspective, the giant balloon.
Oh yes. Oh, that's
because it was the least expensive of all of the options. But I gave my little deposit, and I can't wait to go. I want to see that blue
Thin
rim,
blue line.
Blue line. I want to see that. If I could go on the others, I would be in a nanosecond.
Well, it will be jaw dropping, and you'll be able to loiter there for 4 hours in a wonderful environment, sipping champagne. Apparently, that's really the way to go, I think.
Sounds like a spa.
Yeah,
I know, but I want to see every country. So to me, every country, every planet, right? Like this should be like part of the whole thing, right? I should not only see I shouldn't just see the countries on the planet, but I should see the planet from space.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a perspective that you probably have heard of the overview effect. The notion that astronauts are gifted this opportunity to see the planet without boundaries, without dots on the map that depict a city and lines for boundaries. but just kind of a confluence of nature and humanity. And it really is profound.
I'm curious how close all the photographs that I've seen are to the feeling you actually have being up there.
Well, if Susie, if you've seen like a 3D IMAX film, that's about as close as you can get. It's not the full visceral three-dimensionality of it, but it's that sort of depth of field and speed. You're traveling at 17,500 miles an hour as you orbit the Earth, seeing a sunrise or sunset every 45 minutes. Looking straight down, you're traveling at 5 miles a second. So you'll cross the continental United States in maybe 7 minutes, depending on your trajectory. So it's the imagery is powerful. It's beautiful, but it's not the same thing. And you need to go with Janice, or
Come on, we could do a whole Saturday night group of all of us on the balloon. It would be so much fun. Come on, Susie, we can do it.
Scott, I'm curious. So if you're in a car and you're looking straight out, how fast would you need to go to have any kind of correlation to what you experience in space?
Well, it's the equivalent of Mach 25. So Mach 1 is about 750 miles an hour. So you'd really be clipping along if you were traveling that fast on the surface of the Earth. But from our orbital altitude, it's about 17,500 miles an hour. It's jaw-dropping speed.
I'm getting motion sickness.
I'm trying to get a personal feeling, like if I was in a car and you're going that fast. Mm-hmm. Is it like you're going 5 miles an hour, would you say?
Oh, well, no. I mean, looking straight down at Earth, you're traveling over the surface of the Earth at 5 miles every second.
Yeah.
So, it's, orders of magnitude faster.
Yeah. So how long can you look at, I'm in San Francisco. How long would I be able to have San Francisco in view, for example?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So you can typically see your target if you've got your computer set up and you've got a target that you want to photograph. You'll see, okay, my orbit is crossing over the Bay Area. So you'll see it on the horizon. We call that an oblique view. So you can get your telephoto lens and you can start to see it over the horizon. And then you'll have a couple of 2-3 minutes of your target in sight. So you see it come beneath you, and then you can flip around and see it trail you as well. So it all depends on your ground track, if you're passing directly over a target or if you're north or south of it.
So all right, Susie, get your lenses.
No, I'm just going to say it might be the equivalent if you're in an airplane going over the Grand Canyon. It may be about that same period of time. I'm just trying to envision what you experience.
It's pedaling
Susie,
really
you'll have
fast.
To go with Janice. You'll have to go with Janice with your lenses. Scott, there's a bunch of people who have questions here. Because you've already managed to check off all of these things it's as if you have this bucket list. I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a physician. I want to climb Everest. I want to be in the Olympics. What else is on your bucket list? What's next, Scott?
Well, it's interesting. I do get asked that question a lot, and I would have to say that my bucket list has never been fuller. Adventure doesn't need to be extreme to be wonderful. It can be just a place that you've never been before. Janice can tell you, even if it's a country with a lot of commonality with places you've probably been before, it's still really neat to be in a new place that you've never seen before. So, a lot of places that I still want to travel. I would love to follow in her footsteps and travel to the. How many countries are there? 198 or something?
193 plus 2 observer states. But then you have places like, for example, if you go to French Guiana, it's part of France, but it's in a separate continent. You can't say going to French Guiana. So when you look at that type of that French Guiana is part of France, it's not. They're so different. So when you look at that type of list, which is called the Traveler Century Club list, it's 327. So of the 193, I've only done 140. And of the 327, I've done 195.
Only, Jen.
Only.
That's
No.
an operative word.
I have
What
a
a
lot to
sucker.
do, and I'm losing time with the pandemic.
Well, the pandemic
Oh,
make it tougher. Yeah,
It's very tough.
yeah.
I have a different kind of question. So I think some of us are still thinking, wait, Scott has the same 24 hours in a day as like I do. And I'm sure lots of people are thinking that. So, you talked a little bit about when you talked about the Boy Scouts and really looking not just at the long-term goal, but deconstructing it. What's the next step? What's the next step? I'm curious, and I know I get questions about this from other people about people like you who do so much and are so successful. Are there things that you need to do to keep yourself on track and grounded on a maybe it's not a daily basis, because I did hear when you were doing the Olympic stuff that you didn't sleep, some nights, but is there anything that over your lifespan you've really found that if you go too many days without doing it, you need to do that in order to continue? Like, what's your daily routine?
That's a great question, and I think for me it all comes down to passion. If I end up doing something that I set out to do, but I find out that it's really not the right fit, like the MD PhD in cancer biology, then it's time for a course correction. And so for me, as long as I have challenge in my life, and periodically I do need to recharge my batteries with a little adventure. Doesn't have to be anything extreme. It can be just a neat hike, or a trip to someplace interesting. That will keep me, my batteries charged and able to keep going. Yeah. Getting back to the question about, what is my bucket list? I'm an entrepreneur now, and I would tell you that probably the toughest thing I've ever done is start and grow a company. There's so many different plates that you have to spin, and I'm part of a number of boards, and have my own company and support some others in significant roles. So I love the challenge of doing that, but I wouldn't be able to do it if I didn't have the ability periodically to take a road trip or to do a tough hike, something like that.
Great. And it also, just if I could, one more question, something you said, which was so key, that you, when you knew that you wanted to switch out of the MD PhD program because it wasn't your passion, what advice would you give younger people, well, even older people, anybody really, about what kind of question they should ask themselves? Because lots of times we find ourselves doing something because it was a goal, and then we may no longer want to do that. But how did you know? Like, what did you, I've talked to some people about that. And then, of course, there's also the mourning process, right, of giving that up. And talked about your parents. Like, they had to mourn that they no longer could see you doing that anymore, right? But what, for people who are going through that now, what kind of questions should people be asking themselves, if you could?
Yeah, great question. And I think that what you have to do is ask yourself, why are you doing whatever it is that you're doing? And I think part of the why for me in the MD PhD program was, medical school is expensive. It was a full ride, and it was something that became available to me. I obviously wanted to become a healer. I'd love to be able to make an impact on cancer therapy, but my heart wasn't in it. And so I recognized that, hey, I've got to go to plan B now. I'm going to have to take some loans here and follow a different path.
I will tell you, Scott, as someone who has read over 10,000 MD PhD applications in her career, we can usually sniff out when it's somebody who's doing it for the financial reasons. You had that X factor that the admissions committee truly, truly is looking for, and they saw it. And you just managed to do it in a different way, in a way that was right for you. Before we wrap up, we have one last question, and this is actually from a high schooler.
Oh, great. Cool.
So a high schooler wants to know, Aiden wants to know, what has your favorite job been?
Well, it's tough to say anything but being an astronaut. It's the obviously the excitement of the job itself, the otherworldly benefits of going to fly in space. But I would also say the notion, the team aspect of it, having a mission that's larger than life. The sense of purpose, working with some of the best and brightest people on a common goal, people from around the world, bring together their resources to do that work. So it was really the thrill of a lifetime to serve as an astronaut. I love what I'm doing now just as much, but in terms of the business travel, it was certainly the best being an astronaut.
I bet. Front row seat.
Yeah.
Scott, thank you so much. I am so excited to share your story. I don't know if you appear in anyone else's book, but I'm excited that you appear in my book, The Success Factor. You wrote a memoir yourself. What is the name of your memoir and where can people find it?
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. I'm very proud of my book. It's called The Sky Below, true story of summits, space, and speed. And it came out on Little A Books about 4 years ago now. It's not just a simple recounting of adventures along the way, but actually both successes and failures along the path towards getting to where I wanted to go. And I think it's important to, as we've talked about, be willing to accept failure, learn from failure, and do it better next time. And so it's a very candid book, and it's still a bestseller, doing very well. But I would hope that people would find some inspiration from reading it as well. The other thing I would welcome folks to do is follow me on social media. My Twitter and Instagram handle is just AstroDocScott. So check it out.
AstroDoc Scott. And I will say that he is very active on social media and really puts in some of the greatest content out there. Really, what does the real life look like of a physician / astronaut / Olympic luge coach / somebody who climbed Mount Everest / entrepreneur / inventor? Because really, what does that life look like? You actually get to see it on AstroDoc Scott. He puts in great stuff. And of course, definitely check out his memoir, The Sky Below, which is definitely available on Amazon. Thank you, everybody. We will see you next week. If you are listening to this next week, if you're listening to tonight's show with Scott, if you're listening to the podcast, please do us a favor. We want everyone to hear Scott's story. So please leave us a rating and review. It's available on the Mentor Project channel. Next week is going to be the night before the launch of my book, The Success Factor. I'm going to be in the hot seat, and the panelists are going to be asking the questions. We are definitely turning the tables, turning the mics. It should be fun. And then in the weeks to come, we have many people who are featured in the book who will come to share their stories with us, including the most decorated Winter Olympian Apollo Anton Ono and two-time NBA champion Zaza Pachulia and all kinds of great people. So definitely, if you loved Scott's story, we are just at the beginning. Scott, thank you so much for spending your Monday night with us. Until next time, we will see everyone next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.